Recently I played and reviewed Paper Mario and the Origami King on the Nintendo Switch, and it was without a doubt one of the worst performing videos I produced this year. However, I apparently care little enough about this channel that, thanks to my pleasant surprise with Origami King, I felt compelled to sacrifice all chances of having my videos hit the algorithm and take a new look at the game that started my declining interest in the series, Super Paper Mario on the Nintendo Wii. When Super Paper Mario launched in 2007, it signaled a change in direction that fans of the first two games, fans such as myself, did not take lightly to. After a good 4 or 5 hours with the game back in the day, I dropped it, as would many others. As opposed to being a rather interesting and charming take on traditional turn-based RPGs like its predecessors were, Super Paper Mario sought to break new ground by putting more focus on puzzle solving and platforming aspects, while making combat entirely real-time and leveling and RPG mechanics virtually unnoticeable. Suffice to say the least, this is not what many of us older fans thought we were signing up for, and it became a very sour source of disappointment. Yet it would be unfair to say that this game didn't have its fans and hasn't established a cult following in the years since. In fact, after I quit the game shortly after its release, a roommate's girlfriend decided she would pick it up, and through her playthrough I did get to see most of it. She claimed back then that I was being unfair to the game and that it really wasn't that bad. As a super intellectual and logical counter-argument, I claimed that she was stupid. Seeing her play through the game back then only reinforced the opinions I formed of it early on, but that was also 13 years ago. I like to think I've grown up a bit since then, and that the salt doesn't burn in my wounds as much anymore. Seeing the response to this game become more positive over the years, I did get to wondering if I was indeed unfair to it, and if I did, maybe write it off too quickly. So I figured it's time to hang up my old issues and try and approach this game with more open arms than I did before. After all, this is one of the Wii's highest rated and highest selling games, not to mention the amount of award nominations it got. So I feel pretty confident going in that maybe I have been missing something. So what follows today on this episode of Looking Back At is something of a journey for me. A journey to see how much of my hat I need to eat for railing on this garbage game for all these years. Or it may be a journey to see if my early impressions of the game still hold steady. We'll start like we always do, with the story. To my shock, upon starting the story, I found myself wonderfully enthused. I kinda went into this with the expectation that I'd enjoy it more this time, and that maybe helped me out in the early stages. But expectation or not, we begin at a rather familiar location. A location that immediately stoked some nostalgia and brought back some memories of Super Mario RPG. We find ourselves at the Mario Brothers cabin, a little slice of private paradise. Inside, the mustachioed mascots talk tepidly, enthusiasm drained by the current climate of peacefulness. As the boredom reaches its critical peak, it happens. A toad arrives at the cabin carrying a message most urgent. Peach has been kidnapped. Again. And so the brothers leave to dance a jig that has become all too familiar to them and confront Bowser at his castle. Meanwhile, Bowser is at his castle readying plans to kidnap Peach once more, which of course becomes a product of some confusion when our would-be heroes arrive on scene. But the answers follow rather quickly. A mysterious new opponent, Count Bleck, arrives. A mysterious new opponent, Count Bleck, arrives on scene confessing to the kidnapping of Princess Peach, one instrument in his plan for total world annihilation. But before he leaves, he takes a second instrument, Bowser. Following the will of the Dark Prognosticus, an ancient book that prophesied the end of the world and the rituals needed to carry it out, he begins ritual number 1, the wedding of Bowser to Princess Peach. Mario, having been saved by a strange sprite named Tippy, is brought to the world of Flipside where he learns of another book, the Light Prognosticus, a book that prophesied the coming of a hero to overthrow those who follow the dark teachings and save the world from absolute destruction. Of course, this hero is none other than Mario. This hero is none other than Mario. Only it was here at our arrival in Flipside where I ran into what I would consider my biggest hurdle in getting into this game. I know that this shouldn't be a huge deal and I feel like I should be above this, but I hate, and I mean I really hate, the way Flipside looks. I hate the houses, the props and set pieces. The mod Lewis had a stroke sense of perspective. I especially hate the character designs for the NPCs. At the worst of times, the color palettes are so non-complimentary that I feel as if somebody had sucked my brain out through my nostrils and that I simply can't comprehend the world around me without becoming borderline violently ill. This extends beyond Flipside too, though Flipside is easily the worst. And it's not like I don't believe real design effort went into this and that this all more or less came out as intended, but I just can't get around it. It looks and feels lazy to me even if it really wasn't. Like, this elevator here is literally just a white rectangle on two black lines. I can make this in Microsoft Paint in 2 minutes, and I certainly don't need to spend 2 to 4 years in some art school studying design to pull it off. Maybe this and the NPCs and the lazy excuse for pixel designs, the little sprites Mario gathers throughout his adventure, are the result of the same kind of design restrictions we heard about the studio having during the development of the Origami King. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were actually the cause of new restrictions put on the company. Either way, I really don't like it. But it's not like this is everything in the game. A lot of the game still looks great. Classic characters like Mario, Luigi, Toad, Peach, and Bowser all look fantastic. And some of the zones do too, just not very many of them. From Flipside onward, the story doesn't have too many big developments. Mario travels to different zones collecting pure hearts as the light prognosticus requires, as well as picking up new friends and little sprites called pixels to aid him in his quest. All the while, a black hole opens up and grows day by day, threatening to envelop reality as we know it. By the end, we do have a small twist or two, which maybe makes itself a little more obvious than it intended, but it tells a nice story of unrequited love, and some outdated notions of prejudice that acted as a wedge between two of our important cast members, driving them apart against their will. So yeah, zones, story, art design, it's all a pretty mixed bag. And I'd be lying if I said combat and exploration wasn't the same. The combat and exploration takes a little bit to hit its stride, but ultimately remains lacking the sort of depth its predecessors employed. So, let's talk about that. Combat at first is honestly very boring, underwhelming, and quite frankly discouraging. Seeing this again early on, this may have been one of the biggest things that made me put the game down back in the day. It is such a far cry from what I liked about the first 2 games. This time, however, I came in stubborn and committed. So let's see what we got here. Combat is entirely real-time. You still have HP like before, and killing enemies still helps you level up, though it doesn't feel like much of an event. Most of the characters only have 1 or 2 attacks. The enemy designs should signal pretty clearly which attack will be most advised. Obviously, you don't want to jump on a creature whose back is covered in spikes. Aside from some offensive items, this is all Mario ever really has. Although, as you journey, you gain new pixels and party members. Only 1 pixel can be active at a time, and they all do different things. Not all of them are exactly useful in combat scenarios, but some of them are integral depending on the enemy. For instance, much like in earlier Mario RPG games, these rock guys cannot be damaged by anything not as tough as themselves. So the solution there is to find a way using your pixels to hit one of them into the other. Other pixels may let you drop bombs for the enemies to run into or suck up, and some of them may even give you a ground pound ability. This is a nice addition to combat, but switching pixels can feel a bit cumbersome thanks to the Wii's limited amount of buttons. The same goes for switching partners. Unlike most other RPGs, you can only have 1 fighter active at a time here, so if you want to use Peach, Bowser, or Luigi, Mario must go away. All of your other party members have different attacks and special abilities, which make them more useful in certain situations than Mario is. But that's really all there is here. It is as bare as bread and butter, but leaves enough room for some battles and bosses to have fun and interesting strategies. Though towards the end segments of the game, I just started ignoring whatever enemies I could, as it simply wasn't that engaging. Where leveling feels so unimportant, the game does offer a way to take enemies down faster via a weird card system. If you find enemy cards or capture them in your own cards, you gain these passive bonuses to your damage output against them. I personally never found this interesting enough to pursue beyond what I naturally found while exploring. And speaking of exploring, let's look at that now, as this is where the game's big gimmicks come into play. As you've likely no doubt noticed, this game is almost entirely side-on. As you explore, you'll come across a lot of locked and blocked passages that new party members or pixels will eventually get you past. This is all pretty typical Metroidvania type progression, but the big interesting gimmick here comes from Mario's unique ability as the one chosen by the light prognosticus to view the world from the 3rd dimension. While a lot of the 3rd dimension is rather lackluster, when it plays with perspective it can be pretty neat. How things may look from the side where there's no such thing as depth perception, and how they look from the 3rd dimension can be totally different, and navigating from that new perspective creates a lot of interesting exploration ideas and puzzles. Annoyingly, you are on a timer when you're in the 3rd dimension, and while I get that that can be a fun challenge while in dungeons, making it so you can't just flip perspectives constantly to cheese your way through everything, it really makes no sense to keep you on a timer in safe zones like Flipside. Literally, all that serves to do is waste your time. Exploration-wise, there's not many other gimmicks besides a shoehorned-in point the Wiimote at the screen to reveal hidden objects thing, which was just kinda lame. But I mean, it's the Wii. Not many games escaped awful motion control implementation. Hell, waggle controls and tilt controls make an appearance here as well, however briefly. Like shake the Wiimote to wake Mario up kinda stuff. I'm not a fan personally, but it at least wasn't overbearing. And that's about all the good I can say on the motion controls. So a good amount of this video so far probably sounds like I'm being pretty negative to the game. Or at least rather lukewarm, and really, there is a bit to feel negative towards. But I would be lying if I said this game didn't ultimately win me over. So if the art design and combat pushed me out here and there and the exploration was really only half good, what was strong enough to pull me back in? Well, if there's one thing the Paper Mario games always seem to excel at, it's how they charm the players, and how they use variety to hold players' interest, and Super Paper Mario is no exception to this. The writing is this fantastic series-typical blend of self-aware and absurd. It's hilariously macabre at times, and at other times so downright stupid that it's hard not to feel charmed by it. No matter what's going on in the world, there's always at least one character who can provide some comedic relief. And when a game can consistently make you smile despite its issues, you know there's something special there making it all worthwhile. As for the variety aspect, sometimes the variety comes by way of mini-games or unique zone mechanics. Other times, variety comes in the form of radical tone and atmosphere shifts. In the latter portions of the game, for instance, Mario ends up in the underwear and the over there, and these places really hooked me. Obvious references to Dante Alighieri's Inferno and Paradiso from the Divine Comedy are abound and register as shockingly mature despite the pun names the zones were given. At one point, they have you taking a boat ride across what's essentially the River Styx. And if you fall into the water, yeah, abandon hope all ye who enter here. The apparitions that haunt this deep are sure to make even the most seasoned players feel a bit on edge. I can only imagine how kids must have taken to it. Other parts focus on breaking the fourth wall a bit more, and are some of the parts I'll remember from this game and from this series the most. Like the time you come across the smartass otaku chameleon, who is so obsessed with his dating games and online culture that he has no idea how to properly hold a conversation with a lady. And so the game temporarily transforms into a dating game that you control while he tries to woo the princess. Is this chameleon's character just a bunch of shallow cliches at the end of the day that maybe reinforce a bunch of negative stereotypes about people not unlike myself or maybe many of you who watch this channel? Yeah, it kind of is, but am I offended by that? No. Like, not at all. This shit's hilarious, and to an extent, even accurate. The line about review bombing games or movies that haven't even released yet got a good chuckle out of me, and it kinda shocked me that it's probably even more accurate today than it was when they wrote it. Moments like this really made me happy that I decided to stick with the game this time. Though it's rough around some edges and a far departure from what I wanted, Super Paper Mario leans into its series' greatest strength, its wit, and it does it enough for me to have really enjoyed my overall time with it. Plus, this one song in the Cloud City here sounds like the main theme from The Room, and anything that makes me think of The Room gets my seal of approval. But yeah, really, the OST for the most part was pretty good too. So yeah, this was a strange journey for me. At the start, I was pretty confident that I was going to enjoy it. Within the first hour or two, my confidence plummeted pretty substantially, having seen the combat and Flipside. It was a rocky trek back up from there, but sure as shit and right as rain, it won me over. So was I wrong then in my initial impressions of the game way back? Well, not all of them, but mostly, yeah, I was. I won't tell my old roommate's girlfriend that though. As far as she needs to know, the game's still poop and she's still stupid, so this stays between us. And if this video performs about on par with my Origami King video, I don't think I need to worry about that secret traveling very far. Anyhow, this was my journey through Super Paper Mario. A rather overdue look back for me, and one that I'm happy to say I looked back on more fondly than I ever felt towards it before. So, How do you guys feel about the game? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know too if you feel maybe you were a bit like me and didn't give it an honest chance the first time around, maybe having never even played it at all, or if maybe you did give it an honest try and it just really wasn't for you. It'll be fun to see in those comments where people stand with this rather divisive title. The game that completely splintered the audience and derailed the series for 13 plus years. It might not be what a lot of us wanted, myself included, but I can at least now see that it really wasn't that bad. But that's gonna be all from me today. If you guys like the video, you know the deal. Like, comment, and subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials and the Patreon support page are in the description below, and as always, folks, thanks for watching.